Chapter 1. The Empty Chair at the Banquet. The evening was set to be one of the most distinguished social gatherings of the London season. The grand ballroom of the Belvedere Club shimmered under the golden glow of chandeliers, its mirrored walls reflecting the elegance of the assembled guests. The long dining table was adorned with the finest china, silverware polished to gleam like moonlight, and a centrepiece of fresh roses arranged with impeccable symmetry. Every seat was occupied, except one. Lord Reginald Harrowby, the esteemed host of the evening, was nowhere to be found. The clock had struck 8, then past, yet the master of ceremonies remained conspicuously absent. His butler, an impeccably dressed man with a rigid posture, had discreetly whispered of a small delay to those nearest the head of the table. But as the minutes ticked into an hour, murmurs of confusion rippled through the guests. Where was Lord Harrowby? It was an unusual predicament, to say the least. Harrowby was not a man prone to whims or sudden disappearances. A former diplomat, known for his punctuality and keen sense of decorum, he would never have abandoned his own gathering without notice. And yet there was his empty chair, a silent enigma at the heart of the celebration. Seated near the centre of the table, Hercule Poirot lifted his delicate glass of Burgundy wine, his sharp eyes watching the subtle shifts in the room. His immaculate moustache twitched as he observed the restless glances exchanged among the guests. Something was not right. Of that he was certain. At his side, Captain Arthur Hastings cleared his throat. "You know, Poirot, I dare say this is most peculiar. Harrowby is known for his fastidiousness. If he were to miss his own banquet, it would not be by accident." Poirot tilted his head slightly, his fingers absently smoothing an invisible crease on his dinner jacket. "Precisely, mon ami. Such an absence. It is unnatural. Either our host has been delayed by an urgent matter, or something most untoward has occurred." A stir at the far end of the table interrupted their conversation. The butler, a nervous sheen on his brow, had reappeared. This time he carried a silver tray upon which rested a single envelope. The room fell into a hush as the letter was presented to Lady Evelyn Harrowby, Lord Harrowby's younger sister. She hesitated for the briefest of moments before breaking the wax seal. Her eyes scanned the note, then widened in horror. "My God!" she gasped. "It's from Reginald. He says he's in grave danger." A collective gasp arose. Hastings sat bolt upright. Poirot placed his glass down with meticulous care. "Grave danger, you say?" Poirot murmured, his voice like a whisper of silk. "Ah, but this is most inconvenient, is it not?" His gaze sharpened. "Tell me, Lady Evelyn, when was this letter delivered?" The butler fidgeted. "It arrived not 5 minutes ago, sir, by a courier who left immediately." Poirot's fingers tapped lightly against the tablecloth. "Bon, then I believe, mes amis, that the time has come to investigate." Chapter 2. The Vanishing of Lord Harrowby. Lady Evelyn Harrowby's trembling fingers gripped the letter as if the very ink upon it burned her skin. Her pale complexion had drained further, leaving her looking ghostly under the grand chandeliers of the Belvedere Club. The guests leaned forward in anticipation, their murmurs hushed by the sheer weight of the moment. Poirot extended a hand. "If you would permit, Lady Evelyn." She hesitated before placing the letter into his gloved fingers. Poirot unfolded it carefully, smoothing out its creases with meticulous precision. His sharp gaze flitted across the handwritten words, neatly penned yet bearing the unmistakable tremor of distress. "Evelyn, something is terribly wrong. I fear I have stumbled upon a matter most dangerous. I cannot return tonight as planned. Do not wait for me. If anything should happen, trust no one." "Reginald." Chill settled over the room. Hastings let out a low whistle. "That doesn't sound like a man who merely lost track of time at his club." Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching as he reread the note. "Non, mon ami. This is the writing of a man who knows he is in peril, but not of what kind." He turned back to Lady Evelyn. "Madam, do you recognize anything unusual in this letter? Something that might indicate where your brother is?" She shook her head. "No, only that this is unlike him. Reginald does not scare easily." "A diplomat of his stature?" Hastings mused. "No, I don't suppose he would." Poirot's fingers traced the edges of the letter. "Yet, look here. Do you see the smudging of the ink? The pressure of the pen? This was written hastily, but not in panic. Your brother was thinking clearly, but he had little time." The butler cleared his throat. "I beg your pardon, sir, but what should we do?" Poirot's eyes glinted. "We must begin at the beginning." He turned to Lady Evelyn. "Tell me, madam, when did you last see Lord Harrowby?" She exhaled shakily. "Earlier this afternoon at home. He was in fine spirits. He mentioned he had a meeting before the banquet, but he didn't say with whom." Poirot tapped his fingers against the table. "And where is home?" "Harrowby House in Mayfair." "Bon. And tell me, did your brother seem uneasy, distracted?" "No. He was his usual self, calm, measured. If anything was troubling him, he gave no sign of it." "Curious," Poirot murmured. "A man does not go from serenity to fear in a matter of hours without cause." Hastings straightened. "Should we alert the authorities?" Poirot shook his head. "No, not yet. First, we must retrace Lord Harrowby's steps." He turned to the butler. "You said the letter was delivered by a courier?" "Yes, sir. A young man. He left as soon as he handed it to me." Poirot frowned. "Did he give a name?" "No, sir." "Did he arrive on foot? By car?" "On a bicycle, I believe." Poirot's lips pursed in thought. "Hastings, we must leave at once." Evelyn stood abruptly. "I'm coming with you." Poirot raised a hand. "Madame, I understand your concern, but it would be best if you remained here. If any further messages arrive, they will come to you." She hesitated, then reluctantly nodded. Poirot turned to Hastings. "Come, mon ami. The night is young and a mystery awaits." Chapter 3. Shadows in the Study. The silence within Harrowby House had a weight to it, as if the very walls held their breath. Poirot's keen eyes roamed over the disarray in the study, the scattered papers, the upturned chair, the open drawers, but it was the silver cigarette case, marked with the initials RJM, that had truly caught his attention. Hastings hovered beside him, his brow furrowed. "Who do you suppose this RJM is, Poirot? A friend of Harrowby's? Or an enemy?" Poirot turned the case in his fingers, studying the slight dent on the lid. "Mon ami, consider, if one leaves behind such an item, it is either by accident or design, and I do not believe in coincidences." Hastings glanced toward the door. "Should we search the rest of the house?" Poirot nodded. "Yes, but with caution." As they stepped back into the hallway, the house seemed to groan softly under their weight. Poirot led the way, moving with measured steps. Hastings followed, his nerves on edge. The first door they checked led to a guest bedroom, its heavy curtains drawn. Poirot's gaze swept the room before he nodded for Hastings to move on. The second door opened to a library. Shelves of books loomed around them, their spines lined with gold lettering. A single lamp had been left burning, casting a pool of light over a deep leather armchair. Beside it, a glass of brandy sat untouched. Poirot leaned over, sniffing the liquid. "Still fresh," he murmured. Hastings stiffened. "You mean someone was here recently?" "Oui." Poirot straightened. "And they left in a hurry." A soft creak echoed from beyond the room. Hastings turned sharply, heart pounding. Poirot, however, remained still, listening. Then, with quiet precision, he stepped back into the hall and motioned toward a narrow staircase leading upward. "The servants' quarters," Hastings whispered. Poirot nodded. "Let us see what secrets they hold." They ascended carefully, the wooden steps groaning beneath them. At the top, a long corridor stretched into darkness. Poirot withdrew a small pocket torch and flicked it on, illuminating the narrow passage. The first door they reached was unlocked. Inside, a small, tidy room lay undisturbed. Poirot's light skimmed over the modest bed, the wooden dresser, the single-framed photograph on the wall, a young woman, her eyes solemn. "The housekeeper's room," Hastings murmured. Poirot nodded, but did not linger. They moved on. The next door, however, was different. It was slightly ajar, and as Poirot pushed it open, they were met with a scene of chaos. The bedclothes were rumpled. A chair had been overturned, and on the floor, beside a half-packed suitcase, was a single black leather glove. Hastings exhaled. Someone was leaving in a hurry. Poirot bent to examine the glove. Indeed, and yet they did not finish. He turned toward the wardrobe, stepping lightly as he approached. With a swift movement, he threw it open. Nothing. Hastings let out a breath. For a moment I thought. Poirot held up a hand. "Wait." He knelt, reaching towards the floor of the wardrobe. There, barely visible in the dim light, was the imprint of a boot, a smudge of dust displaced by hurried movement. Poirot touched it lightly. "Someone stood here recently." Hastings swallowed. "Then where are they now?" If in answer, a sudden noise echoed through the house, a sharp thud, followed by the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. Both men tensed. Poirot's eyes flashed. "Come, Hastings! The mystery reveals itself!" They hurried back down the stairs, their steps quick but controlled. As they reached the study once more, the source of the noise became evident. The window had been shattered, its shards glittering on the floor, and beyond, in the dim glow of the street lamps, a figure was fleeing into the night. "Good heavens!" Hastings cried. "They were here the whole time!" Poirot did not hesitate. He surged forward, flinging open the door. "Quickly, mon ami! We must not lose them!" Hastings followed as Poirot stepped onto the damp cobblestone street. The shadowed figure was already halfway down the road, their dark coat billowing behind them. Poirot's sharp gaze locked onto them. "They are heading toward the park." With a burst of energy the two men pursued, their breaths coming in sharp puffs against the night air. The figure ahead moved swiftly, darting past gas lamps and disappearing briefly into an alleyway. Poirot quickened his pace. "They know the city well, but so do we." They cut through a side street, emerging ahead of their quarry near the entrance to Hyde Park. The figure faltered, realizing the trap too late. Poirot took a step forward. "You will find, monsieur or madame, that running is quite unnecessary." The figure hesitated, their breath ragged. Then slowly they turned. The lamplight revealed a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, his dark hair dishevelled, his face streaked with sweat. His eyes darted between Poirot and Hastings, calculating his odds. Hastings took a firm step forward. "Who are you? And what were you doing in Harrowby House?" The man hesitated, then exhaled sharply. Poirot raised a hand. "Wait." His eyes narrowed. "Your name, monsieur?" The young man swallowed hard. Richard Mortimer." Hastings exchanged a glance with Poirot. "RJM." Poirot nodded. "Indeed." Mortimer shifted uneasily. "Look, I don't know what you think I was doing, but I wasn't trying to steal anything." Poirot's gaze remained steady. "Then perhaps you would enlighten us as to why you were searching Lord Harrowby's study in the dead of night." Mortimer ran a hand through his hair. "It's complicated." "Ah," Poirot said softly, "but I am very good at untangling complications." The young man hesitated, then sighed. "All right, but not here. If you want to hear the truth, we should talk somewhere less exposed." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings, then nodded. "Very well, monsieur. Let us return to Harrowby House." Mortimer's shoulders slumped, resigned. He turned and followed them back toward the mansion. Hastings leaned in to Poirot as they walked. "Do you think he's telling the truth?" Poirot's lips curled into a small smile. "Ah, mon ami, the truth is a curious thing. It often hides in the most unexpected places." As they stepped back into the house, the mystery of Lord Harrowby's disappearance deepened. And in the flickering candlelight of Harrowby House, shadows whispered secrets yet to be revealed. Chapter 4. The Secrets of Harrowby House. Hercule Poirot sat in the grand yet eerily silent drawing-room of Harrowby House, the stately manor where the enigmatic disappearance of Lord Richard Winstanley had unfolded. It was a room of refinement, ivory-coloured walls adorned with gold-framed portraits, a chandelier glinting faintly in the dim afternoon light, and a fireplace where embers from a once roaring fire smouldered. Despite the opulence, an air of unease lingered, as if the house itself held its breath, waiting for the truth to be revealed. Beside him, Captain Hastings sat stiffly in a mahogany chair. His brow furrowed as he flipped through the police report Inspector Garraway had reluctantly provided. Across from them, Lady Margaret Winstanley, the missing man's wife, perched on the edge of a velvet-upholstered sofa, her hands clutched in her lap. Her normally poised demeanour betrayed signs of distress. Her fingers twisted the diamond ring On her left hand, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Tell me, madame," Poirot said, his voice gentle but firm. "When precisely did you last see your husband?" She exhaled, glancing toward the heavy drapes that concealed the window behind her. "It was last Tuesday evening, after dinner. We dined at 7, just the two of us, as usual." Richard was in an odd mood, quiet, pensive. He barely touched his food, which is unusual for him, and then, she hesitated, he went to his study. I heard him lock the door. And what time was this? Shortly after 9. Poirot tapped a finger against his chin. And what happened next? Lady Margaret hesitated again, a flicker of uncertainty passing over her delicate features. I retired to bed around 10. The next morning I expected to find him in the breakfast room, but his place was empty. At first I thought nothing of it. Richard sometimes took early morning walks. But when noon arrived and no one had seen him, she swallowed. I knew something was wrong. Poirot's eyes glimmered with interest. "You say he locked the door to his study, and when you awoke, he was gone. Was the door still locked the next morning?" "Yes," she confirmed. "We had to force it open." Hastings looked up from the police report. "But the window was open, wasn't it?" Lady Margaret nodded. The lock on the French window was unlatched. The police suggested he left through there, but— She trailed off, her hands clenching. "But you do not believe it," Poirot finished for her. She shook her head. "Richard would never leave without telling me, and not in the middle of the night." Poirot's gaze flickered toward the grand staircase, visible through the open archway of the drawing-room. Was there anything missing from his study? "No," she said. Everything was in its place. His books, his papers, even his walking cane. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Hastings frowned. "That's peculiar, Poirot. If he planned to leave, wouldn't he have taken something with him?" "Just so, Hastings," Poirot murmured. "And yet he did not." He turned back to Lady Margaret. "Tell me, madame, did Lord Winstanley receive any visitors that evening?" She hesitated. "No, not that I know of." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Not that you know of. Madame, it is of the utmost importance that you be precise." She bit her lip. There was a phone call. Richard took it in his study. I couldn't hear what was said, but he seemed troubled afterward. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. "And did you recognize the voice on the other end?" "No, he did not say who it was." Poirot steepled his fingers. "Très intéressant. A mysterious phone call, a locked room, a vanished man. Ah, mon cher Hastings, it is like a puzzle with missing pieces." At that moment, Inspector Garraway entered the room, his heavy boots thudding against the polished floor. He carried a small leather-bound notebook and looked thoroughly unimpressed. "You've been busy, Poirot," he remarked dryly. "I hope you're not filling Lady Winstanley's head with nonsense." Poirot merely smiled. "Ah, mon ami, I merely seek the truth." Garraway snorted. "Well, while you're at it, perhaps you can explain why Lord Winstanley's valet, Henry Wilkes, was seen sneaking out of the house the very night his master disappeared." Lady Margaret's head snapped up. "Henry? That's absurd. He's been in our employ for years." "Oh, I don't doubt his loyalty," Garraway said. "But the housemaid swears she saw him creeping down the servants' staircase just after midnight." and when questioned, Wilkes admitted to leaving the premises, though he claims it was to visit a sick relative. The inspector scoffed. Likely story. Poirot rose to his feet, smoothing the lapels of his jacket. Perhaps it is true, perhaps it is not. But, Inspector, tell me, has any ransom note been received? Garraway looked momentarily caught off guard. No, and there's been no demand for money either. Poirot's moustache twitched, which suggests that this is not a mere kidnapping, n'est-ce pas? Garraway sighed. You always have a way of making things more complicated than they need to be, Poirot. Poirot inclined his head. Ah, but mon ami, the world is a complicated place. He turned back to Lady Margaret. Madam, I must see Lord Winstanley's study. She hesitated only a moment before rising. Of course, follow me. She led them through the dimly lit corridors of the house, stopping before a grand oak door at the end of a long hallway. The door had been forced open previously, the splintered edges of the wood a silent testament to the event. Poirot stepped inside, his sharp eyes sweeping across the room. It was a study befitting a man of Lord Winstanley's stature. Mahogany bookshelves lined the walls, a Persian rug covered the floor, and a massive desk stood near the French windows. Poirot moved to the desk, his fingers skimming lightly over its surface. His gaze settled on a single sheet of paper, half crumpled and forgotten near the edge. He lifted it delicately and read Midnight, the Hollow Elm. Hastings peered over his shoulder. The Hollow Elm? What the devil is that? Idiome. Close, mon cher Hastings, Poirot murmured, and I suspect a most important one. Lady Margaret frowned. There is an old elm tree on the estate, just beyond the gardens. We call it the Hollow Elm, because of a large cavity in its trunk. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then, madame, I believe that is where we must go next. Garraway groaned. Poirot, if this is another one of your wild goose chases. Poirot lifted a hand. Patience, mon ami. The truth, she is waiting for us. With that, he turned on his heel, leading the way out of the study, the crumpled note clutched between his fingers. Chapter 5. The Hollow Elm's Secret. The night was cold and heavy with mist as Hercule Poirot, Captain Hastings, Lady Margaret, and Inspector Garraway made their way through the sprawling estate grounds of Harrowby House. The air carried the scent of damp earth, and the distant hoot of an owl punctuated the silence. Lanterns flickered in their hands, casting eerie shadows along the gravel path that led to the gardens. Ahead, the towering figure of the Hollow Elm loomed like a spectral sentinel in the moonlight. Its gnarled branches twisted in every direction, and at its base a large cavity yawned like an open wound. The tree was ancient, its bark weathered and cracked, as if it held secrets older than time itself. Poirot paused before it, tilting his head as he examined the dark opening in the trunk. Ah, mon cher Hastings, do you not feel it? The presence of something hidden, something that does not wish to be found? Hastings shivered. It certainly gives off an ominous feeling. Lady Margaret clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Richard and I used to play near this tree as children, she murmured, but he always said it felt haunted. Haunted, Garraway scoffed. More like a perfect hiding place. Ignoring the inspector's scepticism, Poirot crouched down, holding his lantern up to the hollow. The light illuminated the rough interior of the cavity, revealing nothing but fallen leaves and a few scattered twigs. Poirot's moustache twitched. There is something here, something disturbed. He reached in carefully, brushing aside the debris. His fingers met something solid, a rough fabric. With a gentle pull, he extracted a small wrapped bundle. Hastings peered over his shoulder. "Good heavens, what is it?" Poirot unwrapped the cloth, revealing a collection of items. A gold signet ring, a silver cigarette case, and a folded piece of paper. Lady Margaret gasped. "That's Richard's ring! And his cigarette case! He never went anywhere without them." Poirot unfolded the paper, his sharp eyes scanning its contents. The writing was hurried, almost frantic. "Meet me at midnight. The Hollow Elm. Urgent. Trust no one. R.W." A heavy silence followed. Hastings exhaled. So he was here. But where did he go after? Poirot traced a finger over the initials. W. Richard Winstanley. He arranged a meeting. But with whom? Garraway grumbled. If he was meeting someone here, they either took him or he left willingly. Poirot's gaze swept the ground near the tree, searching for disturbances in the earth. He stepped lightly, moving with careful precision. After a moment, he knelt, brushing his fingers against the damp soil. "There are footprints here," he murmured. "Two sets. One belongs to Lord Winstanley. The other is heavier, deeper." "A man's?" Hastings asked. Poirot nodded. "A taller, heavier man. And look, his prints do not return. He arrived, but he did not leave." Lady Margaret's hand trembled. "What are you saying, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot straightened. "I am saying, madam, that your husband did not vanish into thin air. He was taken." Anew led back inside. Harrowby House. The group reconvened in the drawing-room. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows on the polished wood floor. Poirot sat with the recovered objects laid out before him, deep in thought. Inspector Garraway paced. "We've got two possibilities. Either Winstanley staged his disappearance, or someone forced him to leave." Lady Margaret shook her head vehemently. "Richard would never abandon me like this." Poirot tapped his fingers together. "And yet, madame, there is another possibility. What if Lord Winstanley discovered something? Something dangerous?" Hastings frowned. "Such as?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A secret. One worth vanishing for." At that moment, a sharp knock at the door interrupted them. A footman entered, looking somewhat flustered. "Pardon me, my lady. There is a visitor." Lady Margaret exchanged a puzzled glance with Poirot. "At this hour?" "A gentleman. He says he has information about Lord Winstanley." Poirot stood immediately. "Then we must not keep him waiting." A cryptic visitor. The visitor was a wiry man in his late 40s, dressed in a dark coat with the collar turned up against the cold. His eyes darted nervously around the room as he stood just inside the threshold. "Who are you?" Garraway demanded. The man swallowed. "Name's Ezra Wilkes." Hastings stiffened. "Wilkes? You're Henry Wilkes's brother?" The man nodded. "Yes, I think Henry's in trouble, and if you don't find Lord Winstanley soon, he might be too." Poirot stepped forward. "What do you mean, monsieur?" Ezra hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to be lurking in the shadows. Then he leaned in and whispered, Henry knew something about Lord Winstanley's disappearance. That's why he ran. Lady Margaret's face paled. Ran? Ezra nodded. He didn't just leave the house that night. He left London entirely. Garraway crossed his arms. And why should we believe you? Ezra reached into his coat and pulled out a crumpled envelope. Because he left me this. Poirot took the letter carefully, unfolding it. The handwriting was rushed, the ink slightly smudged. Ezra, if anything happens to me, tell them to look at Harrowby House. The answers are there. I can't say more. It's not safe. Poirot's fingers tightened around the paper. Ah, now the picture becomes clearer. Hastings was bewildered. But what does it mean? Poirot looked up, his expression grave. It means that Lord Winstanley's disappearance was no accident. It was a plan. And someone inside this house knows exactly what happened. Secrets within the manor. Midnight approached. Poirot insisted on inspecting Lord Winstanley's study once more. He moved with deliberate care, his sharp gaze sweeping over every surface, every detail. And then he noticed it. Something small, something that had been overlooked before. A thin scratch along the edge of the ornate bookshelf. Poirot ran his fingers along it, then pressed lightly. A soft click sounded. The bookshelf shifted ever so slightly. Hastings took a step back. Good heavens! Poirot smiled faintly. A hidden door! With a slow push, the bookshelf swung open, revealing a narrow passage leading downward. The air that wafted up was stale, tinged with the scent of damp stone. Lady Margaret gasped. I never knew this was here. Poirot stepped forward, his lantern casting a flickering glow into the passage. Then, madame, I believe we are about to learn what secrets your husband uncovered. Garraway unsnapped his revolver. Let's see where this leads. They descended carefully, their footsteps echoing against stone walls. The passage was old, lined with rough-hewn bricks. The deeper they went, the colder it became. And then, abruptly, the passage opened into a small chamber. Poirot's lantern revealed an iron door at the far end, its surface rusted yet sturdy. Hastings's breath hitched. Is someone in there? Poirot approached, pressing his ear to the metal. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, faintly, a sound, a slow, steady tapping. Poirot straightened. Mon Dieu, he is alive! Lady Margaret stifled a sob. Richard! Garraway acted quickly, motioning to one of his men. Break it! Open! With a few heavy blows, the old hinges gave way. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit space beyond. And there, bound but very much alive, was Lord Richard Winstanley. His face was pale, his clothes dishevelled, but his eyes were sharp as he looked up. Margaret, he whispered. Poirot stepped forward. Monsieur, you have much to tell us. And as Lord Winstanley was freed from his captivity, the final mystery of Harrowby House began to unravel. Chapter 6. Shadows beneath Harrowby House. The heavy iron door groaned as it swung open, revealing the dimly lit chamber where Lord Richard Winstanley had been held captive. His face was gaunt, his clothes torn and dusted with grime, but his sharp blue eyes still held fire as he looked up. Margaret? His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Lady Margaret rushed forward, tears welling in her eyes. Richard! She knelt beside him, gently cradling his face in her hands. Thank God you're alive. Poirot observed him closely. Monsieur, do not strain yourself. You have been through quite an ordeal. Garraway's men helped Winstanley to his feet, untying the ropes that had bound his wrists. He winced as circulation returned to his hands, but his expression hardened. I knew someone would come looking, he muttered, but I feared it might be too late. Poirot folded his arms. Tell us everything, Lord Winstanley. Who did this to you? Winstanley exhaled shakily. I don't know exactly who gave the order, but I have my suspicions. Garraway scowled. Let's start from the beginning. What happened the night you disappeared? Winstanley closed his eyes for a moment, as if piecing together his fragmented memories. It started with a letter, an anonymous note left on my study desk. It said I was in danger, that if I wanted to uncover the truth, I should go to the Hollow Elm at midnight. Hastings tensed. The same letter we found in the tree. Winstanley nodded. I thought it was some ridiculous prank, but curiosity got the better of me. I went, thinking I'd meet the sender, but instead I found two men waiting for me. Before I could react, they overpowered me. Lady Margaret gasped. Did you recognize them? No, Winstanley admitted. They wore masks, but I remember their accents. Londoners, both of them. Poirot steepled his fingers. And they brought you here? Yes, they dragged me through a hidden passage deeper beneath the house than I even knew existed. I tried to fight back, but they were too strong. Hastings shook his head. But why? What could they have wanted? Winstanley's jaw tightened. Because I found something. A secret someone wanted buried. Poirot leaned in. Tell me, monsieur, what did you find? Winstanley hesitated, glancing toward the darkened corners of the chamber, as if fearing unseen ears. Then, in a hushed voice, he said, Evidence, proof of corruption. The truth in the hidden archives. The tension in the air was palpable, as Poirot and the others helped Winstanley upstairs. The hidden passageway had led them back into Harrowby House, emerging behind a long-forgotten bookshelf in the east wing. Inside the drawing-room, Lord Winstanley sipped brandy to steady himself, his fingers still trembling. Before I disappeared, I had been looking into certain financial irregularities in my family's estate. My father left behind ledgers, but some accounts didn't add up. Money was being siphoned away. Garraway's eyes narrowed. And you believe this was the reason for your kidnapping? Winstanley nodded. I had just discovered a series of payments, large sums disappearing into unknown hands. I traced them back to a name. Hastings leaned forward. Whose name? Winstanley exhaled. Henry Wilkes. A stunned silence followed. Poirot's moustache twitched. Ah, Monsieur Wilkes, the missing servant. Garraway swore under his breath. So Wilkes wasn't just a runaway. He was involved in something deeper. Winstanley rubbed his temple. I believe Wilkes was blackmailing someone in this house. And when I got too close to the truth, they made sure I disappeared. Poirot's expression was unreadable, which means, monsieur, that your enemies are not mere criminals. They are here, inside Harrowby House. Lady Margaret shivered. You mean one of us? Poirot nodded gravely. I fear so, madam. A game of shadows. The house felt different now. charged with unseen tension. Poirot could feel the weight of secrets pressing against the walls of Harrowby House. Somewhere within these grand corridors lurked the mastermind who had orchestrated Winstanley's disappearance. Poirot turned to Winstanley. "Monsieur, where are these ledgers you spoke of?" Winstanley hesitated. "In my study, hidden in the false panel of my desk." Garraway's face darkened. "Then we'd best retrieve them before someone else does." With Poirot leading the way, they made their way to the study. Winstanley moved stiffly, his body still weak from confinement, but his determination did not waver. He crossed the room, feeling along the underside of his desk until he found the hidden latch. A faint click sounded. A panel slid open, revealing a stack of aged ledgers and a small bundle of letters tied together with string. Poirot took the bundle carefully, untying the string. His sharp eyes scanned the pages. Then he exhaled softly. "Mon Dieu!" Hastings leaned over. "What is it?" Poirot held up a single sheet. "A contract, signed between Henry Wilkes and an unknown party. A sum of £20,000 exchanged for silence and continued cooperation." Garraway took the document, scanning it. "This proves Wilkes was being paid off. But by whom?" Poirot traced a finger along the bottom of the page. "There is no signature, only the initials M.C. Lady Margaret frowned. "M.C. That doesn't match anyone in this house." Poirot was silent for a long moment. Then, suddenly, he turned to Garraway. "Inspector, I believe we must move quickly. Wilkes is in danger. He holds the final key to this mystery." Hastings's brow furrowed. "But we don't even know where he is." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Oh, but we do. The letter Ezra Wilkes gave us. It said Henry had fled London. But he did not flee far. He went somewhere familiar." Lady Margaret gasped. "The old gamekeeper's cottage." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Precisely, madam, and we must get to him before our culprit does." A race against time. The drive to the gamekeeper's cottage was tense. Poirot sat beside Garraway in the police carriage, the wheels rattling over the cobbled road as they hurried through the misty countryside. Hastings, Lady Margaret, and Winstanley followed closely behind in another carriage. The cottage sat on the edge of the estate, nestled between overgrown hedges. Its roof sagged with age, and ivy crept up its walls. The windows were dark. Poirot stepped out first. "He is here." Garraway drew his revolver. "Be careful." The inspector pushed the door open cautiously. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of damp wood and unwashed clothes. Then a faint rustling. "Wilkes!" Hastings called. A figure lurched forward from the shadows, stumbling into the light. Henry Wilkes. His clothes were torn, his face gaunt with fear. His hands trembled as he looked at them, wide-eyed. "They're coming," he rasped. "They know I talked." Poirot stepped forward. "Who, monsieur?" Wilkes shook his head. "M.C. I didn't know at first, but I figured it out. A sound outside, a twig snapping." Garraway tensed. "We're not alone!" Suddenly, the night exploded with movement. A dark figure rushed toward the doorway, a gun gleaming in the moonlight. Poirot barely had time to cry out before a shot rang. "Out!" Wilkes gasped, clutching his side as he collapsed. Hastings shouted, lunging forward as Garraway fired back. The assailant stumbled, falling to the ground with a cry of pain. Poirot rushed to Wilkes's side. "Hold on, monsieur. You must tell us. Who is M.C.?" Wilkes's lips trembled. His breath came in shallow gasps. And then, with his last ounce of strength, he whispered, "Martin! Cartwright!" Poirot's eyes widened. "Mon Dieu!" Lady Margaret's voice shook. "That's—" Poirot stood, his expression set like stone. "The estate lawyer, the man who controlled all the family's financial dealings." Garraway cursed. "Then we have our mastermind." Poirot nodded. "Yes, and now we finish this." Chapter 7. The web tightens, the revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Martin, Cartwright, the Winstanley estate's trusted lawyer. The man who had handled all financial matters for years. Lady Margaret covered her mouth. "It can't be. Martin?" Poirot's expression was grave. "It is always the one least suspected, madam, and yet the clues pointed to him all along." Garraway swore under his breath. "We need to move. If Wilkes figured it out, then Cartwright might already know we're onto him." Hastings, still crouched beside Henry Wilkes's limp body, clenched his fists. The bastard killed him, shot him in cold blood just to keep his secret. Poirot placed a hand on Hastings's shoulder. "There is no justice in anger, mon ami, only in action." He turned sharply to Garraway. "Inspector, you must arrest Cartwright before he disappears." Garraway nodded. "He won't get far." He signalled to his men. "Get back to Harrowby House. If Cartwright's still there, I want him in cuffs." The night was thick with fog as they sped back towards the grand estate. Poirot sat deep in thought, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. The pieces were falling into place now, but one final question remained. Who else was involved? Because Cartwright had not acted alone. Confrontation at Harrowby House. The grand hall of Harrowby House was eerily quiet when they arrived. A few oil lamps flickered, casting long shadows against the panelled walls. The air felt charged with tension. As the group stepped inside, a voice called out, Inspector Garraway!" From the top of the staircase, Martin Cartwright stood, his face a mask of cold amusement. He was dressed in his usual tailored suit, his greying hair neatly combed, but there was a shift in his demeanour, a predator's confidence. "I was wondering when you'd come knocking." Lady Margaret's voice wavered. "Martin, tell me it isn't true." Cartwright's smile was almost pitying. "Ah, my dear Lady Margaret, still so naive." Garraway stepped forward, gun drawn. "Martin Cartwright, you're under arrest for conspiracy, financial fraud, and the murder of Henry Wilkes." Cartwright's expression didn't change. "You have no proof." Poirot lifted a single piece of paper from his pocket. "Au contraire, monsieur. This document, found among Winstanley's hidden ledgers, shows your payments to Wilkes. It is signed with your initials, M.C. Cartwright's fingers curled into fists. Lady Margaret's voice trembled. "Why, Martin? Why betray us?" Cartwright sighed, rubbing his temples. "Because I had no choice." His voice turned hard. "Your husband was digging into things that should have stayed buried. The Winstanley estate, your precious inheritance, was built on fraud. Your father-in-law, Lord Edmund Winstanley, falsified records for years. Money that should have gone to the workers, the land, even the crown. He stole it all. Winstanley's eyes narrowed. And you kept it going? Cartwright's lips curled. Of course I did. Because if I didn't, we all would have fallen. Your family's wealth, your reputation, everything was built on deception. I simply ensured that deception remained profitable. Poirot tilted his head. But Wilkes knew. Cartwright exhaled. Yes, the fool discovered discrepancies in the books. Thought he could blackmail me. I paid him to stay silent, but then... He glanced at Winstanley. Then you started asking questions too. Garraway's voice was ice. So you had him kidnapped. Cartwright smirked. That was not my idea. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Ah, and now we arrive at the heart of the matter. Lady Margaret swallowed. There's someone else. Cartwright chuckled. Oh, yes, someone far more ruthless than I. Someone who has been watching this entire game unfold from the shadows. A slow creak sounded behind them, footsteps, and then a voice, smooth and controlled. Very perceptive, Mr. Poirot. From the dim corridor, a figure stepped forward. Lord Alexander Harrowby, the true mastermind, the mastermind. Revealed, a cold chill ran through the room. Lord Alexander Harrowby, the estate's distant cousin, the man who had welcomed them all with charm and hospitality, now stood before them with an air of quiet menace. Lady Margaret's voice was barely above a whisper. Alexander. Hastings tensed. So it was you. Alexander chuckled. Well, well. And here I thought I'd hidden my tracks so well. His gaze flickered to Cartwright. It's a pity, really. I expected you to be more competent. Cartwright's face twisted. You betrayed me. Alexander smirked. Don't be ridiculous. You were always expendable. Poirot took a slow step forward. Tell me, monsieur, why go to such lengths? The Winstanley estate is vast, but you have your own fortune. Alexander's smile vanished. Ah, but that's where you're wrong. My fortune, as you so quaintly put it, is nothing. I inherited titles and land, but not wealth. My family squandered its riches generations ago. And when I saw how much Winstanley had, how easy it would be to manipulate Cartwright, well, the plan formed itself. Lady Margaret's face paled. You wanted to take everything. Alexander inclined his head. Yes, I arranged Richard's disappearance, intending for him to be presumed dead. That way, the estate's legal control would fall to me as the next of kin. Unfortunately, dear Richard was more resilient than I anticipated. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. And Wilkes? Alexander's expression darkened. Wilkes was a loose end. He knew too much. Cartwright wanted him silenced, but the fool let him escape. So I finished the job myself. Hastings it day, fists clenched. You're a murderer. Alexander laughed. Oh, spare me the moralizing. Do you think your justice will change anything? The powerful always find a way to rise again. Poirot's voice was steel. Perhaps, but you will not. Garraway's men moved in, surrounding him. Alexander sighed. I suppose this is the part where I'm dragged away in chains. But then he moved. A flash of silver, a hidden blade. He lunged toward Poirot. Bang! A single gunshot echoed through the hall. Alexander stumbled, clutching his side. His eyes widened in shock as he crumpled to the floor. Lady Margaret gasped. "Who?" All eyes turned to Richard Winstanley. He held the smoking pistol in a steady grip, his face grim. Alexander coughed, blood staining his lips. His smirk remained, even in his final moments. "Checkmate, old friend." And with that, he breathed his last. Epilogue. The dawn of justice. The morning sun cast golden light over Harrowby House. The storm had passed. Cartwright had been taken into custody. With his testimony, the full extent of the financial corruption would come to light. Lord Winstanley, though weary, vowed to restore the estate's honour. Lady Margaret stood beside Poirot. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Poirot adjusted his cuffs. "Justice, madam, is its own reward." Hastings grinned. "And I suppose this means we can finally rest." Poirot chuckled. "Ah, mon ami, the work of Hercule Poirot is never truly done." As they walked into the morning light, the echoes of mystery faded behind them. But one thing was certain: the truth had prevailed. Chapter 8. Shadows of the Past. The sun rose over Harrowby House, casting golden light across its stone facade. The storm had passed, yet the air remained thick with unease. Alexander Harrowby's body had been removed. His crimes were now exposed, and Martin Cartwright was in police custody. The estate, once filled with deception and hidden agendas, now stood at the edge of a long overdue reckoning. Hercule Poirot sipped his morning tea, seated in the grand drawing-room, his thoughts deep in contemplation. Despite the resolution of Alexander's treachery, something gnawed at him, a single lingering doubt. Hastings paced the room, hands in his pockets. "I must say, Poirot, I never expected Lord Alexander to be the mastermind behind it all. But I suppose it all fits now, doesn't it?" Poirot hummed in thought. "Oui, mon ami." And yet one must always question whether every piece of the puzzle has truly fallen into place. Lady Margaret entered, her expression weary yet composed. "Inspector Garraway has taken Cartwright into custody. Richard is speaking with him, now ensuring the estate's finances are properly examined. But I can't shake the feeling that something still isn't right." Poirot met her gaze. "You have the instincts of a true detective, madam, because I too believe there is one last secret yet to be uncovered." Hastings frowned. But surely Alexander was the one behind everything. Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. Alexander was powerful, yes, but he was also arrogant. His plan was reckless, dependent on deception and misdirection. And most importantly, he only entered the picture after the conspiracy had already begun." Lady Margaret stiffened. "What are you saying, Mr. Poirot?" Poirot set down his tea. "I am saying, madam, that someone else set the events in motion before Alexander Harrowby ever seized the opportunity, and that someone is still in this house." A heavy silence fell over the room. Hastings's brows furrowed. "But if Alexander wasn't the true mastermind, then who?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, mon ami, is the question we must answer before this day ends." A discovery in the library. Poirot insisted they begin their search in Lord Winstanley's private library, the very room where his suspicions had first taken root. Upon entering, the scent of old parchment and polished wood filled the air. Towering bookshelves lined the walls, and a grand mahogany desk sat in the centre, stacked with documents. Poirot's sharp gaze moved across the room, scanning the books, the papers, the smallest details. Lady Margaret stood at the doorway, hesitant. "This room belonged to my husband. I haven't set foot in it since his disappearance." Poirot nodded. "And yet, madame, I believe it is here that the final truth lies waiting." Moving with careful precision, Poirot approached the desk, sifting through the records. "Tell me, Lady Margaret, were there any personal letters Lord Winstanley received before his disappearance? Anything unusual?" She furrowed her brow. "He did receive a letter, a rather odd one, actually. It arrived just days before he vanished." Poirot straightened. "Do you still have it?" Lady Margaret hesitated, then walked to a small drawer at the back of the room. She unlocked it and retrieved a sealed envelope, the parchment yellowed with age. Poirot took it carefully. "May I?" She nodded. Opening the letter, Poirot's sharp eyes flickered over the handwritten words. "My Lord Winstanley, there are matters of great concern regarding the estate's affairs. The truth must come to light. But be warned, there are those who would prefer it stay buried. Should you seek answers, meet me at the old chapel, midnight on the 15th. Come alone." A friend Hastings exhaled. "So, this is it. Someone tried to warn him." Poirot tapped the letter. "Yes, mon ami. But the question remains, who wrote it?" Lady Margaret's hands trembled. "My husband never mentioned this to me. But the old chapel, that was where Richard Winstanley was last seen, before his disappearance." Poirot's expression turned grave. "Then, madame, I suggest we visit the chapel, for I believe that is where we will find our final clue." The secrets beneath the chapel. The old chapel stood on the far edge of the estate, its once grand structure now reduced to crumbling stone and overgrown vines. The air was cold as Poirot, Hastings, and Lady Margaret stepped inside, their footsteps echoing through the empty space. Hastings shivered. "Rather eerie, isn't it?" Poirot ignored him, eyes scanning the walls, the altar, the rotting wooden pews. Then, suddenly, he stopped. "Ah!" Poirot pointed to a small iron ring embedded in the stone floor beneath the altar. "Hastings, if you please." Hastings stepped forward, grasped the ring, and pulled. With a loud creak, a hidden trapdoor swung open. Lady Margaret gasped. "I never knew this was here." Poirot's voice was steady. "Because, madame, it was never meant to be found." Beneath the trapdoor, a dark passage led down into the earth. Hastings swallowed. "Well, this is terribly ominous." Poirot took a lantern from the wall. "Let us proceed with caution, mes amis." They descended into the passage, the air growing damp and musty. The narrow corridor led them to a small underground chamber, and what they found within sent chills down their spines. In the centre of the chamber stood an old wooden chest. Its lid was slightly ajar, revealing stacks of yellowed papers inside. Poirot knelt, lifting one of the documents. His eyes scanned the contents, then widened in understanding. Mon Dieu! Hastings leaned over. "What is it?" Poirot turned the paper toward them. It was an original deed to the Winstanley estate, signed by Lord Edmund Winstanley over a century ago. But scrawled across the document in fresh ink were words that sent a chill through the room. The truth must be hidden. Destroy everything. Lady Margaret's breath caught. This handwriting. Poirot nodded gravely. Yes, madame. You recognize it, do you not? She took the paper, her face draining of colour. It's my husband's handwriting. Hastings froze. Wait! You mean Lord Winstanley knew all along? Poirot's voice was quiet. Oui, mon ami. He discovered the truth long before we did, and someone wanted him silenced before he could expose it. A single sharp sound echoed from the tunnel behind them. Footsteps. Hastings tensed. We're not alone. Poirot turned, his voice calm but firm. Step forward, monsieur. The game is over. A figure emerged from the darkness. Richard Winstanley. His face was shadowed, his expression unreadable. Lady Margaret whispered, Richard. Winstanley exhaled. I never wanted you to know. Poirot studied him. You were the one who wrote the letter, were you not? Winstanley nodded slowly. I tried to warn my cousin. I told him the truth about our family's past, about the fraudulent fortune built on lies. He wanted to come clean, to confess everything. But before he could, someone tried to kill him. Lady Margaret gasped. But you survived? A bitter smile touched Winstanley's lips. Barely. I faked my own death, disappeared into the shadows. I had to, if I wanted to uncover the real mastermind behind it all. Poirot nodded. And now you have. Winstanley's eyes darkened. But the question remains, will justice be served? Poirot straightened. Justice, monsieur, is not a matter of if, but when, and that time is now. Chapter 9. The Final Gambit. The underground chamber was deathly silent. The echoes of Richard Winstanley's revelation still hung in the cold, damp air. The truth had finally surfaced. Lord Winstanley had uncovered a secret so dangerous that someone had tried to kill him for it. Poirot studied Winstanley's face, his keen eyes narrowing. You say you faked your death to uncover the true culprit, monsieur. And yet, even now, you do not name them. Richard Winstanley exhaled. Because I wanted proof. I couldn't return without something that would make them pay for what they did. He gestured to the documents, inside the chest. This is that proof. Lady Margaret's hands trembled as she picked up one of the aged papers. But what does it all mean? What was my husband so desperate to keep hidden? Poirot took the document from her gently, his sharp gaze flickering over the text. Ah, so this is the heart of it all. Hastings leaned in. What does it say, Poirot? Poirot read aloud. The Winstanley fortune is a fabrication. The original estate deed was falsified to cover up the misdeeds of Edmund Winstanley. The wealth was stolen, the land unlawfully claimed. If the truth is discovered, the entire estate could be forfeited. A stunned silence followed. Lady Margaret swayed, her face pale. So it was all a lie? Richard nodded grimly. A lie that my father, your husband, discovered, and once he did, someone decided he had to be silenced. Poirot set the paper down, his expression unreadable. And yet, monsieur, I must ask, who in your mind benefited the most from your father's disappearance? Richard hesitated, then spoke. Alexander Harrowby. With my father out of the picture, He seized control of the estate's dealings. He manipulated everything, making sure the truth stayed buried. Hastings frowned. But Alexander is dead. Poirot nodded. Indeed. Which means there is yet another player in this game, one who has remained hidden, watching from the shadows. Chilling realization swept over the room. A sudden turn of events. A sudden creak echoed through the tunnel. Poirot turned sharply. "We are not alone." From the darkness of the passage, another figure emerged, Inspector Garraway. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were now cold and determined. Hastings blinked. "Garraway, what are you doing here?" Poirot's expression was unreadable. "Perhaps, mon ami, he is here to tie up loose ends." Lady Margaret gasped. "No, it can't be." Richard Winstanley's jaw tightened. You knew the truth all along, didn't you?" Garraway stepped forward, his voice eerily calm. "I have known for years, Winstanley, and I have done what was necessary to protect the reputation of this family." Hastings stared in disbelief. "You mean you were the one behind everything?" Garraway's lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, Alexander Harrowby played his part well, but he was reckless. He had no vision." His eyes darkened. "I did what was required." Poirot folded his arms. "You orchestrated Lord Winstanley's disappearance. You silenced those who came too close to the truth. And when Alexander Harrowby threatened to expose it all, you disposed of him too." Garraway chuckled. "Alexander was a fool. He thought he was in control, but he was nothing more than a pawn." Lady Margaret's voice wavered. You killed my husband." Garraway's expression did not change. "Your husband was a liability. He had to be removed before he destroyed everything." Poirot's eyes flashed. "And yet, monsieur, you have made a fatal mistake." Garraway raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" Poirot lifted the document in his hand. "You sought to hide this, and now it is in my possession." A muscle twitched in Garraway's jaw. "That paper means nothing. No one would believe you." Poirot's lips curved into a small smile. "Ah, but they will, monsieur, because the moment you stepped into this room, you revealed yourself as the true culprit." Garraway's hand moved to his pocket, where the faint outline of a pistol was visible. Poirot raised a hand. "I would not do that, monsieur." A sharp click echoed in the chamber. Garraway froze. Standing at the entrance of the tunnel was Inspector Lestrade, his revolver aimed directly at Garraway. "Put the gun down," Lestrade ordered. For the first time, Garraway's expression wavered. "Lestrade?" Lestrade's voice was cold. "We intercepted your last letter to Cartwright. We knew you'd come back to tie up loose ends." Poirot nodded. "And so, Monsieur Garraway, the game is over." Garraway exhaled sharply. Then, without warning, lunged for the pistol. A single shot rang out. Garraway staggered backward. His eyes widened. His hand clutched his chest, blood staining his coat. And then, with a final shuddering breath, he collapsed. The aftermath. The dust settled. Garraway was dead. His reign of deception and murder had ended. The documents were retrieved, and the truth of the Winstanley estate was finally exposed. The wealth had been built on fraud. but the legal consequences would be sorted in due time. Richard Winstanley stood at the entrance of the chapel, the morning sun casting long shadows across his face. So, it's finally over. Poirot adjusted his cuffs. Oui, monsieur. The past cannot be undone. But now, at last, justice has been served. Lady Margaret wiped a tear from her cheek. I never thought I'd see this day. Hastings clapped a hand on Richard's shoulder. What will you do now? Richard took a deep breath. Start over. Rebuild, not just the estate, but my family's name. Poirot nodded approvingly. A most noble decision, monsieur. Lestrade approached them, tucking his revolver back into its holster. Well, Poirot, I must say, you never fail to impress. Poirot smiled. It is merely a matter of order and method, my dear Inspector. Hastings chuckled. You say that as if it were simple. Poirot twirled his moustache. Ah, but simplicity is the greatest sophistication, mon ami. Lestrade exhaled, surveying the scene. This case will be talked about for years to come. Poirot nodded. Perhaps, Inspector. But for me, there is always another mystery to solve. He turned, stepping away from the chapel as the sun bathed the estate in golden light, and with that, the case was closed. Chapter 10. Shadows of the Past. The morning mist curled around the Winstanley estate, weaving through the ivy-covered stone like a ghost unwilling to be forgotten. Though the truth had been uncovered and justice served, the air remained thick with the weight of history. Hercule Poirot stood at the entrance of the grand hall, his keen eyes scanning the portraits that lined the walls. Each one told a story, generations of Winstanleys, their faces frozen in time. But now their legacy had been rewritten. Richard Winstanley, the heir thought dead, was alive. The estate, built on deception, stood on the brink of scandal, and the man who had orchestrated the web of lies, Inspector Garraway, was dead. Hastings let out a breath as he adjusted his coat. Well, Poirot, I'd say that's the end of it, wouldn't you? Poirot's moustache twitched. Endings, mon ami, are rarely so simple. The past has a way of leaving footprints behind. Hastings frowned. You don't think there's more to it, do you? Poirot tilted his head. Tell me, Hastings, does it not strike you as peculiar that Garraway, a man so careful, so calculated, would risk revealing himself so openly? Hastings scratched his head. Well, he must have been desperate. Desperation, perhaps, but there was something in his final moments. Something unfinished. Poirot turned toward Richard. Monsieur Winstanley, do you believe Garraway acted alone? Richard hesitated. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. I don't know. He was powerful, but he was always working in the shadows. I never truly knew who he answered to. Lady Margaret, standing by the fireplace, spoke softly. If there were others involved, would they not have shown themselves by now? Poirot nodded. Perhaps, or perhaps they wait, watching. A chill ran through the room. An unexpected message. Before anyone could respond, a sudden knock echoed. Through the hall, Lestrade, who had remained silent, exchanged a glance with Poirot before striding to the door. He opened it, revealing a young footman, his face pale. "A message, sir," the footman stammered, holding out an envelope. Lestrade took it and frowned. "Who delivered this?" "No one saw," the footman admitted. It was left at the gate. "Et this morning." Poirot stepped forward, his fingers brushing over the wax seal. It bore an unfamiliar crest, a symbol of an eagle clutching a key. He opened it and read aloud. "The past is never truly buried. One secret leads to another. The real truth lies beneath the chapel. Midnight. Come alone." Silence. Hastings exhaled sharply. "Well, that's not ominous at all." Lady Margaret clutched her shawl. "Beneath the chapel. But that's where we found the documents." Richard frowned. "We searched every inch of that place. There's nothing more to find." Poirot's expression was unreadable. "And yet, mon ami, someone believes otherwise." Lestrade sighed. "It's obviously a trap." Poirot smiled. "We, which is why we must spring it. The midnight rendezvous." The clock struck midnight. The estate was silent. Poirot, his coat buttoned against the chill, made his way toward the chapel. Though the message had instructed him to come alone, he knew Hastings and Lestrade lingered in the shadows, watching. The old wooden doors creaked as he pushed them open. The chapel was dark, save for the moonlight filtering through the stained glass. Poirot's footsteps echoed as he moved toward the altar. And then a whisper. He turned sharply. A hooded figure stepped forward from the shadows. "You are not who I expected," Poirot said calmly. The figure chuckled, a low, almost amused sound. "And yet you came." Poirot nodded. "A puzzle left unsolved is an insult to my little grey cells." The figure tilted their head. "You seek answers." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "I seek the truth." The figure hesitated, then reached into their cloak. Poirot tensed, prepared for a weapon, but instead the figure produced a small leather-bound book. They held it out. "Read." Poirot took it cautiously. The cover bore a name in faded gold lettering, Edmund Winstanley's Journal. His breath caught. The figure stepped back. "The story you uncovered was only half the truth. This is the rest." Poirot opened the journal, his eyes flickering over the first page. And what he read changed everything. The truth of the Winstanleys. The entries were old, the ink faded, but the words were clear. Edmund Winstanley, the supposed founder of the estate, had not simply stolen land and wealth. He had struck a deal, one that ensured his family's rise at an unspeakable cost. The journal spoke of blackmail, betrayals, and a secret society known as the Order of the Key. And then one final entry. "I have secured our place, but the cost is unbearable. The debt will not die with me. One day, a Winstanley will have to pay the price. If you are reading this, know that it was never meant to last. The sins of the past will come for you." Poirot closed the book slowly. His mind raced. The order of the key, the symbol on the letter, and the warning that one day the price would be paid. He looked up. "Who are you?" The hooded figure's lips curled. "A messenger." Poirot stepped forward. "Why bring this to me?" The figure's voice was barely above a whisper. "Because the debt is about to be collected." And with that, they vanished into the darkness. The gathering storm. Poirot returned to the estate, his mind whirring with possibilities. He placed the journal on the desk before him and exhaled. Hastings entered. Well, what was it? Poirot looked at him. "A warning, mon ami, and a promise." Lestrade frowned. "You think there's more to this?" Poirot nodded. "More than we could have imagined. The Winstanleys did not simply steal an estate. They entered a game far more dangerous." Hastings shuddered. "And now someone intends to collect." Poirot's gaze darkened. "Yes." Lady Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Poirot, what does this mean for us?" Poirot looked at her, his voice steady. "It means, madame, that the real mystery has only just begun." Chapter 11. The Debt Comes Due. A sharp wind howled through the corridors of Winstanley Manor, rattling the window panes like the ghost of an old debt demanding its due. The weight of the past bore down on every creaking floorboard, every flickering candle, and every shadow that lingered just a moment too long. Hercule Poirot sat in the study, his fingers tracing the cover of Edmund Winstanley's journal. The key words within had revealed a truth far darker than even he had anticipated. This was no simple case of murder or inheritance. It was a legacy of deceit, a contract written in blood. Hastings paced by the fireplace, his nerves frayed. "Poirot, this is madness. You're telling me that this entire estate, this entire family, was built on some secret society's bargain." Poirot sighed. "Not just a bargain, mon ami. A contract." Lestrade, standing with arms crossed, narrowed his eyes. "A contract with whom?" Poirot opened the journal to the final haunting entry and read aloud, "One day a Winstanley will have to pay the price. If you are reading this, know that it was never meant to last. The sins of the past will come for you." Richard Winstanley exhaled sharply. "And you believe this Order of the Key intends to collect now?" Poirot glanced at him. "The message I received at the chapel suggests as much. Someone left this journal for a reason." Lady Margaret, sitting stiffly in an armchair, shook her head. "I don't understand. What exactly did my ancestors do?" Poirot flipped to another entry in the journal. His voice was low but steady as he read, "The order promised us power, wealth, and status. In return, they asked for silence. When time came. A name erased, a history rewritten. But the cost does not disappear. It lingers in the walls, in the stones, in the very ground beneath our feet." Silence fell over the room. Then Hastings murmured, "A name erased. Poirot, what does that mean?" Poirot tapped his fingers on the desk. "It means that the Winstanleys were not merely beneficiaries of this society's influence. They were its executioners. Buried truths." The thought sent a chill down Richard's spine. He stared at Poirot. "You mean my family murdered someone?" Poirot gave a small nod. "Someone whose existence threatened the foundation of the estate. Someone who, even in death, remains a danger." Lady Margaret looked pale. "But that was centuries ago." Poirot met her gaze. "And yet, the past has a way of clawing its way back." Lestrade exhaled. "So, what do we do now? We can't exactly arrest a secret society." Poirot leaned back, steepling his fingers. "No, but we can find what they seek." Hastings frowned. "You think there's something left to uncover?" Poirot tapped the journal. "They did not leave this message out of kindness. They wish for me to find something. The question is, what?" Richard's jaw tightened. "If this is about my family's past, Then I will help." Poirot smiled. "Bon, then let us begin. A desperate search." The first step was to examine the chapel's foundations. Armed with lanterns and tools, Poirot, Hastings, Lestrade, and Richard made their way through the fog-laden grounds toward the ancient stone building. The chapel had long stood as a monument to the estate's history. But if the journal was to be believed, it was more than just a place of worship. As they stepped inside, Poirot ran a hand along the cold stone walls. "The answers we seek lie below," Lestrade frowned. "And how do we get below?" Poirot gestured toward the altar. The Winstanleys would not have risked an open burial. There must be a hidden passage. Hastings moved forward, pressing against the altar. "It's solid. I don't see any levers or switches." Poirot examined the edges. His fingers brushed against something, a faint engraving. He leaned in, Ada tenebris redimus. Hastings raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" Richard translated, his voice barely above a whisper. "We return to the darkness." Poirot nodded. "A fitting motto for those who bury the truth." He pressed against the inscription. A low rumbling filled the chamber. The altar shifted, and, beneath it, a passageway yawned open, revealing a dark, spiralling staircase descending into the earth. Lestrade drew his pistol. "I have a bad feeling about this." Poirot smiled. "That, my friend, is the sign that we are on the right path." The catacombs beneath Winstanley Manor. The air grew colder as they descended. The flickering glow of their lanterns barely illuminated the damp stone walls. The deeper they went, the more the silence pressed in. And then, at the bottom of the staircase, they saw it. A door, a massive iron-bound door, with the symbol of the Order of the Key carved into its surface. Richard stepped forward. "How do we open it?" Poirot studied the design. "The key!" His voice trailed off. His fingers brushed the journal. A realization struck him. The answer had been there all along. Carefully, he flipped to the last page of the journal and examined the ink. The words, though faded, held an odd spacing. Poirot reached into his pocket, pulling out a small powdered substance. He sprinkled it over the page. The hidden ink reacted, and a shape appeared. A key. Poirot held the journal up to the door. It is not a real key, but a message." He traced the outline on the iron surface. A faint click. The door swung open. Beyond it lay a crypt, and within, a single coffin. The forgotten name. Richard stepped forward hesitantly. "Who is buried here?" Poirot knelt beside the coffin. The nameplate was worn and scratched, as if someone had tried to erase it. But Poirot was prepared. He pulled out a small brush and swept away the dust. Slowly, the letters became visible. And then he read the name aloud. "Nathaniel Blackwood." Richard stiffened. I've never heard of him." Poirot nodded. "That is because he was never meant to be remembered." Lestrade frowned. "You think this is the man they erased?" Poirot stood. "Yes, but the real question is why." They turned to the coffin, and then a noise, a low creak, from the shadows. Hastings tensed. "We're not alone." Poirot turned sharply. "Everyone, back to the door, now!" But before they could move, the entrance slammed shut. and a voice echoed through the chamber low cold, "Waiting! You should not have come here." A figure emerged from the darkness, hooded, cloaked, and in their hand a dagger. A deadly confrontation. Poirot did not flinch. "Ah, so the Order has sent their emissary." The figure stepped forward, their dagger gleaming in the lantern light. "You have trespassed on sacred ground." Richard clenched his fists. "Sacred! This is a tomb for a man my family erased." The figure tilted their head. "And yet here you stand, alive. Do you not understand? The debt must be paid." Lestrade tightened his grip on his revolver. "Not today." The figure chuckled. "You think bullets can stop what has already begun?" Poirot narrowed his eyes. "You believe in shadows. I believe in the truth." The figure's grip tightened on the dagger. "Then you are a fool!" And they lunged. Chapter 12. The Keeper of Shadows. The dagger's blade glinted in the lantern light as the hooded figure lunged toward Poirot, the air crackling with tension. Hastings barely had time to react before Poirot sidestepped gracefully, his polished shoes pivoting on the damp stone floor. The blade missed him by inches, striking the wall with a sharp metallic clang. Lestrade, acting on instinct, drew his revolver. "Stop right there, or I'll—" Before he could finish, the figure vanished into the darkness, retreating into the labyrinthine shadows of the underground crypt. The sound of their footsteps echoed, fading swiftly. Richard exhaled sharply. Who the devil was that? Poirot dusted off his sleeve, seemingly unfazed. "The past has many keepers, mon ami. That was merely one of them." Lady Margaret's voice wavered. "They called themselves the Order's emissary. Does that mean—" Poirot nodded. "That means they are not alone." The realization sent a fresh chill through the air. The group stood in a forgotten tomb, staring at the unmarked coffin of Nathaniel Blackwood, while an unseen enemy lurked in the shadows, determined to keep its secrets buried, and the door leading out of the crypt firmly shut. The price of truth. Lestrade approached the door and pressed against it. Solid stone. He cursed under his breath. "We're trapped in here." Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the chamber. "Non, mon ami. There is always a way we simply have not found it yet." Richard ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "I don't understand why this is happening. My family has lived in this manner for generations. Why would the Order strike now?" Poirot turned, back to the coffin of Nathaniel Blackwood. His gaze lingered on the worn nameplate, his fingers brushing over the scratches. Then he spoke softly. "Because, monsieur, the debt has come due." Hastings frowned. "But what debt?" "You keep saying that, Poirot, but no one knows what exactly the Winstanleys owed." Poirot gestured to the coffin. "The answer lies within." The air in the chamber thickened as the weight of his words settled over them. Lestrade's eyes widened. "You don't mean—" Poirot nodded. "We must open the coffin." The coffin of Nathaniel Blackwood. A heavy silence followed. Then Richard spoke, his voice tight. "Desecrating a grave! It's unthinkable." Poirot met his gaze. "And yet, monsieur, your ancestor already did just that, to the memory of Nathaniel Blackwood." Richard's fists clenched, but he said nothing. Lestrade hesitated, then sighed. "I suppose if it'll get us out of here, We don't have much choice." With great effort, they pried open the heavy lid. The scent of decay and time wafted out, but inside there was no body, only bones and something else, a sealed scroll. Poirot reached in carefully, pulling the scroll free. The parchment was brittle, yet the wax seal remained intact. Hastings leaned in. "What does it say?" Poirot broke the seal and unfurled the scroll. His eyes moved swiftly over the text, his expression darkening with each line. Then he spoke. "It is a contract." The Winstanley Pact Poirot read aloud. "On this day, in the year of our Lord 1692, the House of Winstanley enters into agreement with the Order of the Key. In exchange for wealth, status, and land, the Winstanley heirs agree to uphold the silence, to erase the name of Nathaniel Blackwood, and to ensure that no truth of his existence shall ever surface. The price shall be paid in blood when the time of reckoning arrives. Signed, Edmund Winstanley." Richard paled. "My ancestor made a deal with them." Poirot's voice was grave. "Not just a deal, a binding oath." Lestrade exhaled sharply. "And what does the price shall be paid in blood mean?" Poirot's gaze flickered to Richard. "It means that the debt was not just metaphorical." Lady Margaret trembled. "Then is Richard in danger?" Poirot gave a solemn nod. "Oui." A sound suddenly echoed through the chamber. Footsteps. Returning. The hooded figure stepped back into view, their dagger glinting once more. But this time they were not alone. 3 more figures emerged from the shadows. Lestrade raised his revolver. Again. "I suggest you reconsider whatever you're thinking of doing." The central figure, the first assassin, spoke in a low, almost reverent tone. "The debt must be settled." Their gaze locked onto Richard. Hastings stiffened. "They're here for him." Poirot stepped in front of Richard, his voice calm but firm. "You wish to collect your price." He held up the contract. "Then let us renegotiate." The figures hesitated. Poirot's mind worked swiftly. They followed rules, rituals. This was not about simple vengeance. It was about a pact. If the contract was forged in blood, Poirot continued, then there must be a way to break it. The leader of the figures stepped forward. "There is one way." The room held its breath. Poirot's voice was steady. "Tell me." The figure pointed to the coffin. The pact was sealed in the presence of Nathaniel Blackwood's remains. It can only be broken if his name is restored. Richard frowned. "Restored?" The figure nodded. "You must acknowledge him, publicly, as one of your own." Richard hesitated. "And if I refuse?" The figure's voice turned cold. "Then the debt will be settled in another way." Their dagger gleamed. Lestrade cocked his gun. "I don't think so." Poirot held up a hand. "Attendez!" He turned to Richard. "You have a choice, monsieur. The past can remain buried, but the cost will be your life. Or you can restore the truth and break the chain of blood." Richard swallowed hard. The weight of centuries pressed down on him then. He took a breath and made his decision. The breaking of the pact. Richard stepped forward, his voice ringing through the chamber. "I, Richard Winstanley, acknowledge Nathaniel Blackwood as my ancestor. His name shall be restored, and his memory shall no longer be erased from our family's history. The figures did not move. The air seemed to shift, as if some ancient force had been disturbed. The leader reached into their robes and produced a small iron key. They handed it to Poirot. "It is done." The shadows around them seemed to recede. The tension that had weighed down the air lifted. Poirot glanced at the key. "And this?" The leader's voice was softer now. "The key to your freedom." They gestured toward the heavy stone door. Poirot inserted the key into a hidden lock beneath the door's frame. With a deep, resonating groan, the door swung open, and Aunt Lestrade exhaled. "I can't believe that actually worked." Poirot turned back to the figures. "You have protected this secret for centuries. What will you do now?" The leader's hood dipped slightly. "We are the keepers of shadows, but the shadows are fading." Then, without another word, the figures melted into the darkness. Gone. Only the echoes of their footsteps remained. The light returns. As they emerged from the crypt, the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Poirot turned to Richard. "It is over." Richard nodded, exhaling deeply. For the first time, the weight of his family's past was no longer on his shoulders. Poirot smiled. "The past is not meant to be erased, mon ami. It is meant to be understood." Hastings clapped him on the back. "Well, that was an adventure, wasn't it?" Lestrade holstered his gun. "I need a drink." Poirot chuckled. "Ah, mon ami, so do I." And with that, they stepped into the morning light. Chapter 13. The Silent Witness. The morning sun had barely begun to rise when the group emerged from the crypt beneath Winstanley Manor. The cold night had passed, but the weight of their discovery still clung to them like a shadow. Richard Winstanley took a deep breath, his expression weary but resolute. The pact had been broken. The Order of the Key had relinquished their claim. But even as he stood there, free of the ancient debt, something gnawed at his mind. Poirot noticed. "Mon ami, you have won your freedom. Why do you look as though you have lost?" Richard hesitated, glancing back toward the crypt's entrance. "Because something still doesn't make sense." Lestrade sighed, rubbing his temple. "What now? We've just barely escaped being sacrificed to a secret society. Can't we have a moment's peace?" Poirot smiled, but his eyes remained sharp. "Peace, Inspector, not while the truth remains incomplete." A vanishing body Hastings furrowed his brow. "What do you mean, Poirot? We found the contract. We found Blackwood's remains. Mystery solved, surely." Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. Do you not see? We did not find Blackwood's remains." Lestrade frowned. "But there were bones in the coffin." Poirot steepled his fingers. "Indeed, but were they Blackwood's?" Silence fell. Lady Margaret spoke hesitantly. "Surely, if they were in his coffin—" Poirot lifted a finger. "Ah, but there was something missing, n'est-ce pas? What did we not find?" Richard's face paled as realization struck. There was no skull. Hastings blinked. "Good Lord!" Lestrade muttered a curse. "Then whose bones were they?" Poirot turned toward the manor, his expression dark. "That, mes amis, is what we must discover, the last will and testament." Returning to the grand hall of Winstanley Manor, Poirot asked Richard a single question. "Tell me, mon ami, what do you know of your ancestor's will?" Richard hesitated. "You mean Edmund Winstanley, the one who made the pact?" "Non," Poirot said patiently. "I mean the will of Nathaniel Blackwood." Richard frowned. He wouldn't have had one, would he? If he was erased from history, his estate would have been absorbed by the Winstanleys. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Exactly." Lady Margaret's voice wavered. "But that means somewhere there must be a record of it." Poirot gestured toward the vast mahogany bookcases lining the study. "Shall we look?" Lestrade groaned. "I suppose we're not getting breakfast first, are we?" Poirot smiled. "The truth does not wait, mon ami. The hidden ledger." After an hour of searching through old ledgers and records, Hastings let out a triumphant cry. "I think I've got something!" Poirot hurried over as Hastings carefully unfolded an aged document, its edges brittle, its ink faded but still legible. Richard read aloud, "To my heirs, should the day come when my name is restored, let it be known that the truth has always been within these walls. Seek the silent witness." Hastings scratched his head. "Silent witness? What does that mean?" Poirot tapped his chin. "A witness that does not speak, yet one that remembers all." His gaze flickered toward the fireplace. And then, as if struck by inspiration, he strode across the room to an antique grandfather clock. "The silent witness," he murmured. Hastings blinked. "The clock?" Poirot smiled. "Let us see what secrets time has kept hidden." The clock's secret Poirot examined the ornate carvings along the base of the clock. His fingers traced an odd indentation, a nearly imperceptible gap in the wood. With a delicate push, something clicked. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside lay a small leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Richard exhaled sharply. Blackwood's diary. Lestrade gave a low whistle. "I'll be damned!" Poirot carefully turned the first page. The name inscribed inside sent a chill through the room. Nathaniel Blackwood. The diary's revelation. The diary revealed Blackwood's final days. "I know they are coming for me. The Order will not forgive my betrayal, but I will not be silenced. If this is found, know that my body was never meant to be laid to rest. They will take it, hide it, and use it to bind the curse forever. But I have left a clue. My skull, the proof of my murder, remains within these walls. Let the truth be found." Hastings shuddered. "His skull is still in the manor." Poirot nodded. "Oui, Hastings, and I suspect I know where." The wall of lies following. Poirot's lead, they moved to an old study deep within the manor, unused for decades. Poirot inspected the wood-panelled walls, running his hands along the surface. Then he stopped. A section of the wall sounded hollow. "Here," he said simply. Lestrade stepped forward, prying open the panel with his knife. The false wall gave way. Inside was a small alcove, and within it a human skull. Richard recoiled. "Good God!" Poirot examined it closely. "See the fracture along the temple. He was struck from behind, murdered." Lady Margaret whispered, "They hid his body to erase him completely." Poirot nodded, and in doing so, they ensured their curse would last. Until now. Richard swallowed hard. What do we do? Poirot's gaze was firm. We give him his name back. Restoring the name that evening, a proper burial was held for Nathaniel Blackwood in the Winstanley family crypt. This time, with his real remains, Richard stood before the gathered crowd, his voice strong. I, Richard Winstanley, acknowledge Nathaniel Blackwood as my ancestor. His story shall not be forgotten. His truth shall not be buried. As the last words were spoken, a strange stillness settled over the air. Poirot closed his eyes, and for the first time in over 2 centuries, the silent witness was at peace. The case is closed, or is it? As Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart, Lestrade clapped him on the shoulder. "I'll admit, Poirot, you surprised me." Again, Poirot chuckled. "Ah, mon ami, the greatest surprises are always found in the past." Hastings grinned. "Still, something tells me we haven't seen the last of the order." Poirot's smile faded slightly, and as they drove away from Winstanley Manor, a lone figure watched from the shadows. Their voice was barely a whisper. The order never forgets. Chapter 14. The Shadow of the Order. The night was thick with mist as the last of the funeral attendees departed from Winstanley Manor. The echoes of Nathaniel Blackwood's name had barely faded, yet an unease lingered in the air. Poirot, Hastings and Lestrade had remained behind at Richard Winstanley's request. Despite the restoration of Blackwood's legacy, the weight of something unseen pressed down upon the estate. Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I thought putting him to rest would end this." Poirot, ever meticulous, adjusted his cufflinks. "Mon ami, a wound centuries deep does not heal in a single night." Lestrade crossed his arms. "Let's be clear. Blackwood was murdered, his body hidden, and his name erased to protect a secret society's agenda. Just because we've uncovered the truth doesn't mean the Order of the Key is going to let things rest." Hastings, ever the skeptic, frowned. "But surely, without the contract or the hidden remains, they have no more hold over the Winstanleys." Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. If history has taught us anything, it is that power does not surrender so easily." At that moment, a knock echoed through the grand hall. A visitor in the dark. The butler, an aging but sharp-eyed man named Mr. Fielding, opened the massive oak doors. A cloaked figure stood in the doorway. The group tensed. The figure took a deliberate step forward, lowering their hood to reveal a stern-faced woman in her early 50s, her grey hair pulled tightly into a bun. Her piercing blue eyes swept the room before settling on Richard. "My name is Eleanor Harrow. I come on behalf of the Order." The tension in the room thickened. Richard's jaw tightened. "The Order no longer has any claim here." Eleanor's lips curled slightly. "Is that so?" She stepped forward, the firelight flickering across her cold features. "You misunderstand, Mr. Winstanley. The Order is not here to reclaim its power." Her gaze flickered to the skull resting on the mantelpiece. "The proof of Nathaniel Blackwood's murder. We are here to warn you." A warning from the Order. Lestrade scoffed. "Oh, that's rich. A secret society that's been manipulating history for generations is now offering warnings." Eleanor's expression remained unreadable. "Detective, you see us as villains, but we are merely keepers of balance. The contract was not meant to bind Richard's soul, only to protect the knowledge Blackwood carried. Hastings folded his arms, and that knowledge was— Eleanor sighed. Nathaniel Blackwood did not just betray the order. He stole something. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Something important enough to warrant his murder. Eleanor nodded. A manuscript. Richard frowned. A manuscript? Eleanor's voice dropped to a near whisper. The Codex of Eternum. The name sent an almost tangible chill through the room. Poirot studied her intently. I have heard that name before. Eleanor's expression darkened. I am not surprised. It is one of the most dangerous texts ever written. The lost Codex Poirot turned to Richard. Tell me, mon ami, have you ever come across such a text in your family's archives? Richard hesitated. We have a vast collection of books, some dating back centuries, but I've never heard of the Codex of Eternum. Eleanor's voice was grave. That is because it was never meant to be found. Blackwood stole it from the Order, and in his final moments he hid it. Before we could retrieve it, his name was erased, his records lost. And now, after all these years, you have reopened the door he closed. Lestrade narrowed his eyes. And why should we believe you? Eleanor exhaled, as if expecting the doubt. Because if you do not find the Codex first, others will. Poirot's eyes flashed. Others? Eleanor took a step closer. The Order may have sought to keep the manuscript hidden, but we are not the only ones aware of its existence. She turned to Richard. If the Codex is still within your family's holdings, you are now in danger. The fire crackled ominously. Hastings muttered under his breath, This just keeps getting worse. A search through time. With Eleanor's warning heavy in the air, the group set to work. Poirot, ever methodical, led the search through the Winstanley archives. Towering bookshelves filled with ancient volumes, handwritten ledgers, and forgotten records. Richard and Lady Margaret assisted, unearthing dust-covered tomes and brittle scrolls. Lestrade, ever the sceptic, grumbled as he flipped through countless boring estate records. Hastings, meanwhile, sneezed his way through centuries of neglected parchment. After hours of fruitless searching, Poirot paused, deep in thought. The answer is here, he murmured, tapping his temple. Blackwood's final words. Seek the silent witness. Hastings groaned. We already did. That led us to his skull. Poirot smiled. But perhaps we did not look closely enough. His gaze turned to the grandfather clock once more. The final clue moving swiftly, Poirot inspected the inner mechanisms of the clock. His fingers traced the ornate metalwork until he found it, a small engraving, barely visible, carved into the brass pendulum. 3 simple words. Codex. In Soli, Poirot stepped back, his expression triumphant. Mes amis, we have our answer. Richard frowned. What does it mean? Poirot turned to the window, where the first light of dawn had begun to break through the mist. Solis, he said softly. Latin for sun. His gaze locked onto the grand sun emblem embedded into the manor's stained glass window. And in that moment, he knew where the Codex was hidden. The secret chamber, rushing to the eastern wing of the manor, Poirot led the group into an ornate study, its walls lined with elaborate sun motifs. One particular golden crest stood out, a large gilded sun emblem above the fireplace. Poirot ran his fingers over the design, pressing gently. A mechanism clicked, the wall shifted, a hidden compartment opened. Inside lay an ancient leather-bound book, the Codex of Eternum. The race begins. Eleanor exhaled sharply. You have no idea what you've uncovered. Poirot carefully lifted the Codex. Its binding was cracked with age, its pages inscribed with symbols and languages long forgotten. Hastings peered over his shoulder. What does it say? Eleanor's voice was grim. It is not meant to be read. Richard swallowed hard. What do we do now? Poirot's expression was unreadable. There is only one course of action, mon ami. He turned to Eleanor. We destroy it. A stunned silence followed. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. It is the only way. But before anyone could move, a gunshot shattered the air. The window exploded inwards. Figures clad in dark robes surged through the broken glass. The order. Ash was not the only one hunting the Codex. And now, the real battle had begun. Chapter 15. The Codex Conspiracy. The night had been long, but the moment the Codex of Eternum was uncovered, the true storm began. Glass rained down as masked figures leapt. Through the shattered window, their movements swift and calculated. The embers of the fireplace cast flickering shadows on the walls, illuminating their dark robes and gleaming weapons. Poirot barely had time to react before a shot rang out again. This time, striking the wooden frame of the bookshelf inches from. His head down! Lestrade bellowed, drawing his revolver and firing back. Hastings, ever one to follow orders in a crisis, dragged Richard and Lady Margaret behind an overturned table. Eleanor Harrow, despite her composed nature, moved with remarkable precision. With a flick of her wrist, she produced a hidden dagger from her belt and threw it with deadly accuracy, embedding it in the shoulder of one of the attackers. He cried out, staggering backward. Poirot clutched the Codex of Eternum tightly, his mind working in overdrive. The attack was no mere robbery. It was an orchestrated effort to seize the book before its secrets were fully unveiled. Mon Dieu, he muttered, ducking behind the grand piano as another bullet shattered a vase nearby. This is most inconvenient. Lestrade's return fire had taken out one of the intruders, while two others retreated behind the heavy curtains, using the dim lighting to their advantage. The leader, a tall figure in a dark crimson mask, stepped forward, unfazed. The book, Monsieur Poirot, he called in a low, chilling voice. Hand it over, and no one else will be harmed. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, standing up despite Hastings's frantic protests. Ah, non, mon ami. That is not how we play this game. The masked man tilted his head. You truly believe you can stop us? Poirot's eyes twinkled. You have made an error, mon cher adversaire. You assume I have not already deciphered what I need to know. A tense silence filled the room. Hastings, still gripping his pistol with uncertain hands, glanced at Poirot. I say, Poirot, you have? Poirot simply smiled. At that moment, the sound of distant sirens filled the air. The intruders hesitated. The leader exhaled sharply. This is not over. With a sharp whistle, He signalled his remaining men, who vanished through the shattered window as quickly as they had arrived. Lestrade wasted no time. "After them!" he barked, but the criminals were already lost in the night. Poirot dusted off his suit and walked calmly toward the now abandoned window. Ah, toujours dramatique, these criminals, but they do not fool Hercule Poirot. Hastings blinked. "Poirot, what do you mean? You don't even have the full translation of the Codex." Hastings," Poirot said, tapping his temple, "but I do not need the full translation to see the truth." Lady Margaret, still shaken, clutched the edge of the fireplace for support. "You mean you've already solved it?" Poirot turned, the glint of revelation in his eyes. "But, of course, the final piece of the puzzle was given to me the moment those men entered the room. And now, mes amis, the endgame begins." Hastings swallowed. "I have a bad feeling about this." Poirot only smiled. "Come, mon ami, we have a conspiracy to unmask." Chapter 16. The Enigma Unravelled. The early morning fog draped over London like a ghostly shroud, muffling the distant hum of carriages and footfalls along the cobbled streets. Inside the sitting-room of Lord Ashford's estate, a heavy silence settled over the occupants. The air was thick with anticipation. Poirot stood at the centre, holding the Codex of Eternum, its ancient leather cover worn but still imposing. Hastings shifted uneasily, rubbing his temple. "Poirot, I must say, you've been unusually cryptic. You claim to have solved it, yet you've shared nothing. What exactly do you mean by the endgame begins?" Poirot merely smiled, pacing toward the hearth. "Mon ami, patience. Your solution is delicate, and it must be handled with the utmost precision." Lestrade, standing with arms crossed, let out an exasperated sigh. "Look here, Poirot, you've got us all in knots. First, we have a stolen artifact, then an attempted assassination, and now masked intruders storming the house like something out of a penny novel. What exactly is going on?" Poirot turned, his eyes gleaming. "It is very simple, Chief Inspector. A game of deception has been played from the start, and now we must see the final act." The hidden cipher Poirot walked to the table where the Codex lay open. The inked script scrawled in cryptic Latin, symbols seemed indecipherable, save for the margin annotations. The work of a meticulous scholar. Poirot ran a gloved finger over the delicate pages. This book, you see, was never meant to be read in its entirety. It was written as a puzzle, with layers upon layers of misdirection. Lady Margaret, still pale from the night's ordeal, whispered, "Misdirection? Oui, madam. A trap for the greedy. You see, those who sought this book believed it contained instructions for an unimaginable treasure. But no, that was never its purpose. The real secret lies not in what is written, but in what is missing." Hastings frowned. "I say, Poirot, that sounds rather vague." Poirot lifted a single page, tilting it under the morning light. At first glance, it appeared ordinary, but then a subtle shimmer, a hidden watermark revealed faint symbols in a sequence unseen before. Richard gasped. "Good Lord, I never noticed that." Poirot nodded. "It is only visible in certain light. And here is where our mystery unravels, mes amis. The Codex does not lead to gold or riches. It is a cipher. designed to reveal the identities of a secret society that has operated in the shadows for centuries. Lestrade's brows furrowed. Secret society? Oui, the Order of Eternum, an organization so old that it predates the British Crown, and they are still active, pulling strings, manipulating history. This book contains the key to their most closely guarded secrets. A cold hush settled over the room. Eleanor Harrow, standing by the window, finally spoke. Then last night's attack, it wasn't about wealth. Poirot turned. Precisely, Mademoiselle Harrow. They were not common thieves. They were operatives of the Order, determined to reclaim this book before it could be decrypted. Hastings, still piecing it together, shook his head. But why kill for it? Surely, if they had it before, they could have burned it. Poirot clasped his hands together. Ah, mon ami, you touch upon the greatest irony. The Order was betrayed from within. Someone among them allowed this codex to surface. Someone who wanted the truth exposed. Lestrade straightened. And you know who it is? Poirot gave a knowing nod. Oui. The final clue was delivered to me when the masked men attacked. A name in the shadows. Poirot turned the page, revealing a section where an ancient name had been crossed out violently. The original writer of the codex was a man known as Lucius Devereux, a 17th century scholar who had ties to every major power in Europe. But he was erased from history. Why? Richard exhaled. Because he betrayed the Order. Poirot snapped his fingers. Exactly. And history is repeating itself. Someone within the Order betrayed them once more by allowing this codex to fall into the wrong hands. And that, mes amis, is why people are dying. Lady Margaret's voice trembled. But who? Poirot turned, his gaze piercing. The answer was with us all along. The man who knew too much, who spoke too carefully, who manipulated this game from the shadows. He let the silence hang for a dramatic moment, and then Lord Ashford. A collective gasp filled the room. Lestrade's grip tightened on his. Revolver. Ashford? But he was murdered? Ah, no, my dear Lestrade. His death was staged. Lord Ashford never died that night. He orchestrated this entire affair. Hastings gawked. Poirot, that's madness. No, Hastings, it is logic. Poirot began pacing. Think of it, the fire, the body that was conveniently beyond recognition. Too perfect, too clean. It was a deception, carefully crafted, to mislead us. Lady Margaret covered her mouth in horror. But why? Poirot's expression turned grave. Because Lord Ashford is not merely a member of the Order. He is its mastermind. And by vanishing, he ensured that no one would suspect his true role. A sudden chill passed through the room. Lestrade swore under his breath. If Ashford is alive, then where is he now? Poirot picked up the codex, his fingers lightly brushing the final hidden inscription. He is closer than we think, mes amis, and he knows that I know. A distant clock chimed. Poirot turned sharply. And that means we have very little time. The final move. As the sun broke through the mist outside, Poirot's mind raced. Lord Ashford had played his hand well, but he had made one fatal error. Hastings, breathless, leaned forward. Poirot, what do we do now? Poirot smiled, but there was a sharpness to it. We set the trap, mon ami, and this time we ensure that Lord Ashford does not escape justice. The end.